Well, we're wide open sideways, and talk is cheap. We got the foot to the floor, we're gonna drive her in deep.
In the beginning, stock cars outran the police to deliver the hooch to our ancestors. So sweet. Are you ready for a trip down victory lane? Where Richard Petty's winnings were insane, and Dale Earnhardt put everyone to shame. Canadian Junior Handley is in the Hall of Fame. From the home of Canada's crown jewel, Jukasa Motor Speedway, live from Haldeman County, it's time for the Driver in Deep podcast. Are you ready?
Well, we're wide open sideways.
Hello, everyone. WingnutSports.com is proud to present the Driver in Deep podcast. My name is Mark, and I'm here today with Alex Nagy. Together, we're going to take a deep dive into stock car racing and any form of motorsports with 2 or 4 wheels. We're going to talk about today, yesterday, and beyond, and whatever else comes up.
Before we get started, a special thanks to Brent Mordew and the Vicious Circle and his company, Killer Art Designs, for our amazing Driver in Deep soundtrack and logos. If you're looking to create any professional audio, video, or other creative, check out Brent at killerartdesigns.com. With over 35 years experience, Killer Art Designs is your audio and visual identity specialist. They've done a great job for us. What do you think?
Oh, I just love the soundtrack. I really couldn't believe how awesome it turned out. I shouldn't say I couldn't believe it. I was just incredibly impressed with it. How about yourself?
Yeah, me too. I've known Brent since high school. He was always that creative guy. He was always, he has a band. He does design, creative. He does it all. And thinking back now on what he's doing today, it makes sense because he was always that guy that was just way more creative than the rest of us.
Well, and our logos are awesome too. What we gave him to start with and what he ended up with, just incredible. Yeah, way to go, Brent. Thank you very much. Okay, so today, this episode is brought to you by Kenny Drinkwater Jr. When you want to drink water, Kenny D is your man. Potable, non-potable, flavored or not. Kenny D's water comes in all shapes and sizes. The bottles are environmentally friendly too. Just toss those empties and they just disappear into thin air.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny D. As you and I both know, he's got deep pockets. Hopefully we can sign Kenny D to a long-term deal here because we always need sponsors for sure.
What an incredible business. Just incredible, isn't it? So, Alex, how you doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
Pretty good. It's almost the end of the week. How about, Alex? Let's tell our listeners a little bit about ourselves, starting with you.
Oh, great. Thanks for the heads up. As we get going and having more episodes, we'll, I'm sure, touch on more things that we both do or done or want to do. But for myself, for those that don't know, I started racing in 1981 at Flamborough Speedway. It was my home track, great track, just north of Hamilton. My dad raced forever, and which is how I got started. I met my wife, Sandy, while racing at Flamborough against her dad. My brother raced. His sons, my nephews, both race, Carson and Hudson. My niece races. We're just a racing family. Everything about, almost everything we do has some connection to racing, which is we're pretty proud of. And racing's for myself, it's taken me all over North America, and even had a chance to go to Japan once with IndyCar when I was working with Alex Tagliani. So, we got a lot to cover there. We're not going to talk about it all today. It's been a great ride so far. And, we're just really, I just, every day I look at this like we're just getting started.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you met your wife when you raced against her dad. How did that work out? Like, did you have to let him win so you could court her? Or did you? Yeah, how did that work?
I think you know me by now. That wasn't going to happen. Not going to lie. We ended up, I think we ended up parking beside each other one day in the pits, and that's kind of, my antenna went up, and then of course, once that happened, I probably made it a point to park in that same spot all the time. And then the racetrack stuff came into play, and there were some times where she probably didn't know whether to side with her dad or me. So there's some tense moments, but at the end of the day, it all worked out best for me.
Did you ever have a tight race between the two of you, or it was like close coming into the finish line?
I got to watch how I answer this. Yeah, sure. We did, for sure.
Okay. Good. Well, we'll leave it at there for now. And a little bit about myself. I have exactly zero experience in racing. Have never done it. Have been part of Jukasa since the reopening. Have worked with you very closely on several aspects of the racetrack and the campground, and so many different facets of the business, but have never raced myself. I'm originally from St. Catharines. I was raised there most of my life. Son of a General Motors worker. I grew up in the city, went to university there, had some great years, played many sports. My family, as you know, I'm married, have a great wife, Joni, who also works at Jukasa. And I'm sure that you'll point out many times that she's a more valuable employee than I am. I also...
Well, let's be honest. The only reason you ended up here is because of her.
I guess you could say that. That
now
is
because,
true. That
I
is
like
true.
your wife. So because of that,
yeah,
you get to keep coming back.
I get to keep coming back. Yeah. Well, I like to think I add to the experience there as well. Having a great time so far, other than this past year was a little rough for everybody. I also work in the casino business. I've been doing that since 1996. I have a great kid, Callie, a couple of great step kids, Chloe Ann and Sasha. And, life is good here in Caledonia, Ontario. I'm also a little bit of a technology geek, which is probably one of the reasons why we're doing this today. So, you and I, let's talk about Wingnut Sports. We've been talking about doing something like this for a little while now, but Wingnut Sports, which we mentioned earlier, wingnutsports.com more specifically, is the host of what we're hoping to be our podcast network that's going to be focused on sports and entertainment. It's set up as an online portal. We're going to host multiple podcasts, maybe some blogs, video. I don't know. There's so many different ways to host video now, YouTube being the most obvious. And, now there's TikTok, Instagram, and, all kinds of different social media platforms that we're going to look at. One thing's for sure, this is going to be laid back. Not just this podcast, but every other podcast we do. We want it to be fun. We want to try to make people laugh. We want to make sure that if they're going to give us their time, that we make sure that it's enjoyable. Driver and Deep. Yeah, Driver and Deep is the first podcast we're launching, and it makes sense. Go ahead.
You hit it right in the nail right in the head, Mark. We're going to have serious content for sure. We're going to have some incredible guests, but like you said, need to keep it light. Want our guests to be comfortable, not trying to be anything that we're not. We're going to ask questions or talk about things that might not have been talked about openly in the past. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. And I think that's the key, is see where it goes. Not heavily scripted, not, super, super structured like a newscast. We just want to just do everyday stuff.
Right. Absolutely. Why don't we talk about the name? Where did the name come from? How did we get to wingnutsports.com?
I think that's the biggest reason why we hadn't launched our first podcast, was because it took us about 2 months to come up with the name, because every time we come up with something, of course, you had this big explanation on why we can't use it. And that gets right back to what you said earlier about a geek. You said tech geek. Let's be honest, you're just kind of a geek.
Yeah, geek, nerd, those words are interchangeable, and I'm good with it.
Yeah, I get it.
Well, Wingnut, that name itself, you brought it forward. I know.
To be honest, my wife Sandy is the one who brought that. We went back and forth between the four of us, your wife Joni, my wife Sandy, us two, trying to come up with a name, a title, if you will, for our podcast network. and to keep it, sporty, automotive, and all that stuff. And it was hard. And there's so many names out there. It was hard not to step on somebody's toes. And going back and forth, I think one night at home, Sandy said Wingnut Sports. So I sent it to you. Then, of course, you had the big, like every other name, you had the big reason why we couldn't do it.
Well, I could look it up, but I think I did say I really liked the name. That was that was my first thought. But of course, when you're trying to come up with a brand, you want to make sure that there's no stigma attached to it. And I think that, I did point out that there might be a little bit of a mental health stigma to Wingnut. And also there's the political activist side of it, Wingnuts, that, we wanted to make sure that people wouldn't associate us with that. And that's certainly not what we meant. But ultimately we decided on the name. And here we are.
Yeah, we have ultimate respect for all those things you mentioned, for sure. And, I think I said to you finally at one point, if we're going to worry about every single little thing on every single little name, we'll never have a name. And to be honest with you, we talked about how loosey-goosey-ish this deal's going to be. And I think I finally said to you, if we're going to be so wound up in every single little part of a name that might affect somebody, I'm out. It's not total respect for all that stuff. And we'll probably talk about it at different times with some of our guests, but let's just roll here. That's not, not that we're not going to worry about other things or other people or stigmas or whatever, but ultimately we know what Wingnut is. We refer to it. Our wives probably think we're Wingnuts, all that stuff. So that's really what this is about.
And that's why it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it works. And so what we hope to do is that we want to bring in other hosts for some other podcasts, maybe different subject matter experts, whether they're a professional hockey player or maybe baseball player, maybe someone that's a little nutty like us, that's willing to work hard and do what it takes to try to get our brand out there, get the podcast out there, and hopefully bring some entertainment to people. And we're going to look at some different formats too. Maybe we'll look at some shorter daily podcasts, some video podcasts, and maybe there'll be some seasonal stuff, some experimental things for sure, because they say in marketing 50% of your advertising dollars work. We just never know which 50% it is. And it's the same thing with this. We're going to throw some things at the wall. We'll see how they turn out.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see how Kenny D, how he makes out. Talking about advertising dollars.
Yeah. See if
that works out for him.
If his water business goes through the roof, then yeah, for sure. We've been brainstorming some podcast ideas already. Some things around hockey. We're both big hockey fans. Some, maybe some general sports podcast. I don't know who put this in our rundown, but what's this about scooters and e-bikes? I don't.
Yeah, that'll be a whole new episode.
I don't know how they got in there somehow, but
so just for our listeners, so there was a time when Mark thought he was a biker. He had a scooter. Then he actually bought a motorcycle. That was short-lived because he bailed on it and wrecked in a traffic circle, rode it off. And now I think he's looking at an e-bike. I think that you just missed the motorcycle part.
Maybe a trike. Maybe a trike. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll get into that later, but yeah, we haven't got enough time today.
Ultimately, though, whatever we do, we want to keep it fun. We want to try to make you laugh a little bit. And we also want to talk about real things. So a little bit of everything in there, but underlying what we talk about is going to be real. We hope you enjoy it, and we hope you keep coming back for more. And our first podcast is Driver and Deep, which is what we are doing right now. And so let's tell everybody why. Why are we doing this podcast? It kind of makes a little sense, Alex. It's a natural fit to tap into your years of experience, in the racing industry.
Yeah, I have a bunch of experience. It's funny. You don't ever think you have that much experience. Then you kind of look back and you realize that you've been fortunate to be in this. For me, being in this industry for so long, as long as I can remember, our family was involved. So I named one of my cats after a dirt racer at Maryville Speedway, Henry Shyback. I mean, that's how far back it goes. And some of our listeners hopefully will know who Henry was. Number 26, had a little coupe. of course, I was a fan of my dad, but Henry was one of my guys, so I named a cat after him. So it's like you say, I think it's a natural fit for me and for you. You love the sport so much now, and you've got so much great interest in it, and you want to learn so much about it. So between the two of us, we'll definitely get to a bunch of great topics and writing down guest lists. It's amazing, just coming up with people that we're going to be able to talk to, hopefully, that is going to have so much interest to our listeners. And even for me to go back and talk about not ask how they made out last year, what their expectations are next year, but ask stuff or share some memories that we made together. I think that'll be so fun. Just totally pretty much uncut, raw stuff. Talk about some stories that aren't talked about publicly, maybe sometimes. Looking forward to it. I think it's going to make a lot of sense. There's a lot of stories to tell, a lot of stories to share, and hopefully, that, and we'll, like you say, we'll keep the fun in it. We'll add some humor, make everybody feel at home. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, me too. And, there's so many other great podcasts right now that talk about, current events and racing and so on. And, that's not really what we want. And the name itself sort of indicates where it is we're going. You talked about stories, Driver in Deep. We want to go deep in, behind the scenes of the racing industry and talk about some of the stories and the life experiences that you and the guests that we're going to have on are going to bring. And that, I have to tell you, some of the names that we've talked about, and not to get ahead of ourselves here, I can't wait to hear some of these stories from some of the people that we're planning on having on.
Yes, me too. I have to ask you, so for our listeners, when I said to you to name the racing podcast Driver in Deep, and you not being a race guy, what were you thinking at first?
I just thought...
Were you thinking about some of the porn sites you looked at in the past?
I was thinking, Alex, you're the subject matter expert here, so if Driver in Deep makes sense for a race podcast to you, then it must make sense to everybody that's going to listen.
Yeah, whatever.
Clearly there's a little ambiguous note to the name, and that's what makes it fun. And that's what we want to try to do here. So how about we start with some topics for today? This one here, this is big. And, I think it's appropriate for our first podcast to tell everybody that Alex Nagy, you were just nominated to the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame. What an incredible honor that must be. But what I want to know is, how does it feel to be inducted alongside some of the superstars of the sport? Alex Tagliani, Jacques Villeneuve, Paul Tracy, Mario Andretti in the international category, and of course, Junior Hanley. Just to name a few that are all members of the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame. How does that feel to be inducted alongside them?
So, actually kind of unreal. 2021 or 2020, late last year, I got the phone call from Dr. Hugh Scully that I was inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, which took me totally by surprise. I'm at Dinger's up here in Hagersville picking up some wings. Just got back in the truck and the phone rings, and I see Hugh Scully on my screen. What the heck is Dr. Hugh Scully calling me for? So I couldn't wait to pick it up, and then he lays that on me. It was, I think there's probably about a 5-second pause. He's going to ask me if I was okay. And at that time I caught my breath and thanked him very much for the phone call. And it was unbelievable, to be honest. And, even now, it hasn't been that long ago, but it still feels surreal. It's cliche-ish. I mean, everybody says, oh, there's not a chance I should be in there named with people like you had mentioned. But for me, right away, it made me I started to think about my career in this industry again, because I always look forward and don't think a whole lot about the past. And then I started to think, holy smokes, we're going to have a ceremony. I'm going to have to think about and talk about who helped and what got me to where I am. And so you start to think about all the people that helped you along the way. And of course, it starts with family. My mother, father, brothers, sisters, and now my wife and my son and my daughter, who sacrificed so much and sometimes were along with me to travel all over North America to do this stuff, however it was, whether it was racing, managing racetracks in Tennessee, whatever it was. Some of the names you mentioned, Tagliani, I was fortunate enough to work with him for several years in the IndyCar Tour. Jacques Villeneuve, I crew chief for him in the NASCAR Canada Series. I met Paul Tracy through Alex Tagliani. During the time at IndyCar, I got a chance to meet Mr. Andretti, Junior Hanley, huge idol of mine. You didn't mention my other huge idol locally or in Ontario, all over North America, Don Biederman. The list goes on and on. So it was a huge, huge honor. And really, the only reason that I got the phone call was because of the people that helped me along the way. Mm-hmm. And that was, to me, that's the biggest thing. Nobody gets to a Hall of Fame of any type without being surrounded by great people that help you. I was inducted into the Flamborough Speedway Hall of Fame several years ago. And that was like the pinnacle for me. I thought that was it. I got recognized at my home track, and then this happens, and not, one's not lesser than the other, but to be in the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame is still, like I say, still surreal, super honored, and really happy I answered that phone that day.
Yeah. Now, one thing here, though, that I feel like it's the elephant in the room. Should there be an asterisk beside your name because of COVID?
Yeah. So the ceremony for the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame every year is in Toronto at the Toronto International Auto Show. In conjunction with that, of course, it was canceled due to COVID. The auto show was considering going virtual, and it became just too much. And if that would have happened, they probably would have did the induction ceremony virtually. And I got a phone call about a month and a half ago to say that they're going to postpone it and do it for real in 2021, which is great for me because now we're going to get a chance to celebrate with friends and important people that help me and family. So, we're going to be able to attend the ceremony, hopefully, and do it the right way. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, and now that I just made that comment, I may no longer be on that list. But anyway.
I'm sorry, were you on it?
Well, that's true. Maybe I was never there to begin with.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, Alex, what a tremendous honor it is. As your friend, I'm very proud to see you be nominated, and I can't wait for that to happen and for you to be part of that. Well, while we're talking about you, now you find yourself in the role of the general manager of Jukasa Motor Speedway. And, I know you've been very busy at that for the past few years, reopening this legendary racetrack. What can you tell us about Jukasa Motor Speedway's history?
Oh, a lot of history for sure. Opened in 1966 as a dirt track. Mr. Slack took it over in 1967, immediately paved it. The reason that he ended up at the racetrack was that Slack Lumber was a big supplier to the original owners, as the story goes, and the owners got in too deep and they couldn't afford to pay. So however the deal worked out, Mr. Bob Slack ended up with the Speedway in 1967 for money owed, paved it, and of course the history of the racetrack speaks for itself from there on out. And after Mr. Slack owned it for quite some time, it went through a few different ownership groups or individuals until took it through till 2009. And at that point, the place closed and mothballed, which was a shame. It was a huge void in the industry for Ontario and Canada and North America because, there's people like Dale Earnhardt Sr., Alan Kowicki, Mark Martin, Mike Eddy, Junior Hanley, Don Biederman, Bill Zardo. I mean, I could go on and on forever, and we haven't got enough time, but the history here is huge, and it was a shame it was closed. For me, it was my most favorite racetrack I ever raced at. I got to come here and race against the top competition, and then it was closed. And I wasn't racing anymore at that point, but it was still unfortunate, and I knew everybody else would have an opportunity to race at this racetrack. Then, working for NASCAR Canada, I got introduced to the owners that bought the Speedway in around late 2016. They started a bit of a program to rejuvenate it. They contacted me working for NASCAR to see about having a race at some point once they were done. Things didn't work out with the group they had trying to do the refurbishment and get the track back off the ground. Anyways, long story short, through that introduction, I got to meet the owners for them to let me understand that they were going to get this project done. It's had some speed bumps. They're for real. And sure enough, as we know now, they are. And as it turns out, after probably a 8 or 12 month period, I got to know them more, and they offered a job for me to come here and be part of the rebuild and the design and get the thing going. And it was tough. I loved my job at NASCAR, learned a ton there, still have great friends. But, first to ever be told I was going to work for the biggest sanctioned body in the world, being NASCAR, and then get a chance to rebuild the most favorite track I ever raced at in my life, being Jukasa Speedway at that time, be part of the rebuild there, I would have said you're crazy. And because of, again, people I met along the way, and one thing leads to another, I got a chance to come here, and it's been a great challenge. We're not done yet. We opened in late 2017. My owners are incredibly supportive. They've invested a whole bunch of money, and makes me want to do the biggest job possible to try to recreate some of the things that happened here in the past as far as top talent. And I think we're getting to that point. Now, we're making some new history here at Jukasa. Now we renamed it Jukasa Motor Speedway, and we're making some new history.
So you talked about the great ownership group that you are part of here and their commitment prior to opening the track. Can you tell us a little bit about the types of investment that they took on before you even opened?
They did a lot of work on the ground. They started to, I think they initially the idea was to keep the original wall, tear up the racetrack, redo the racetrack, keep the wall, and move forward, repave the racetrack and move forward. And just as I was starting to be part of this, the concrete guy that was coming to do some work on the wall, there was areas where he could blow holes through it. And he said, this isn't going to be safe. So as it turns out, everything from the wall in was tore out, and we started fresh. But we kept the original footprint, the design, the footprint of this racetrack being a D-shaped with the arched back straightaway, swooping fast corners. We kept that layout and increased the banking on the straightaways and the corners. Of course, from the wall in, the only thing that's not new is the infield building, and it was in great shape, so we were able to maintain that. So the dollars, of course, as you can imagine, the huge amount of dollars. I've probably prevented them from spending some money because I'm a little bit more frugal. I presented everything I presented to them. I give options, whether from the lighting to, metal halide to LEDs, and I tried to do my due diligence and my homework prior to anything that we did here. And so far, they've always said, which is the best. I would make my statement. Okay, perfect. That's what we're doing. So, you can't ask for anything more. Super fortunate. And as a group, we've got a long way to go. We think that we can continue to make it better. Rome wasn't built in a day. I think we're in a great position to just add small things as much as we can by the year, and live up to the nickname this place has, which is Canada's crown jewel.
Another thing, I know that the ownership group also is committed to the future of racing just by the fact of the investment that they just put in building a whole new kids playground there. I mean, that's an incredible little place for kids to go around and hang out before, during, and after a race.
Exactly. One of the things that I think in my experience, looking back, I think there's a void there where we stopped catering to our fans. We missed a whole, I don't want to say whole generation, but we missed a whole period of time there where the sport was like a lot of businesses, things were coming pretty easy. You'd open the gates, people would roll in. So it's natural. You just stop working at it. I think you don't plan on it, but you just do. And I think we missed a whole gap there of 10 years or so where we stopped creating new fans. And because we had so many fans, and I say we, just talking about the industry in general, but we had so many fans that we just stopped looking at the future. And I think we're all guilty of it, whether we're as a racer, not giving back enough or not staying post race for kids to come over and do autographs because you're mad, you're pissed off, whatever, you want to get home and you're bailing out, you're packing up and leaving. And we have to get back to the days where we want fans to be here. We want fans to be at the gate waiting for us to open post-event so they can get across the racetrack and see their favorite driver. And we have to, I don't want to say recreate it, but we have to make it just naturally. That's what happens, because that used to happen all the time. I know I got off track there, but that was I went forward to that, with our owners to say, I think we need a playground. They said, get it designed, give us a price. We agree, let's do it. Now we've got it. And now we see kids that camp here with their families on weekends. They can't wait to get in and hop on the playground and play. It took a little bit of time, and that's what you're trying to create, man. You need to get kids involved and get new fans. And it because they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, doesn't mean they're race fans. They come here and camp and every other racetrack around, come with their mom and dad because they have to. Now they've got something to do once they get here. And I know other tracks do the same sorts of things, whether it's fan clubs, kids clubs, or whatever. And that's the key. Get them involved, get them to want to be here first, and they'll become a race fan.
Certainly, that's hopefully what the whole industry has realized as well, and that other tracks and other people in the industry are thinking, hey, how are we going to attract new fans to the race? And that's certainly a great step forward by doing that.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, meetings when I worked with NASCAR, they are definitely heading in that direction. Meeting with the great track promoters and owners we have in Ontario, we're all on the same page. We know we have to, and it was easier back then too, Mark, you have to understand, because there wasn't a whole lot to do. There wasn't as much to do. And there's a lot of stuff to do now, man. It's not as easy in any business, not just whining and crying about the motorsport business. It's not easy. And you have to have something that puts you over the edge to get people to grab people's entertainment dollars. And it's the experience. We have a saying here that you can't go wrong if the customer wins. And that doesn't mean you get a win every night. You don't get the checkered flag every day. But if you can get one most of the time, then I think you're on the right track.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about 2020. You mentioned disposable dollars. And, for this year, that certainly changed quite a bit with the pandemic being the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the pandemic and how it affected Jukasa.
Yeah, first of all, it's affected everybody in the world. So it's not exclusive to Jukasa or the motorsports industry, but motorsports were a form of entertainment, and probably this industry, sports, entertainment, racing, all those types of sports that are attended by fans are definitely one of the worst or hardest hit, because we are just so restricted. And that's not for everybody. I mean, the NFL was able to operate, and they still are right now, heading to their Super Bowl, of course. But for them, their TV contracts are so huge. But when you get to the CFL, anything that's a stadium type event where you depend on crowds to pay for your entertainers, in our case, race car drivers and teams, CFL for football players, concerts to pay the entertainers that are on the stage. And you can't have that. You just can't have those events and pay those people because there's just no money. Definitely our type of industry has been one of the hardest hit. So 2020 was tough. We had 3 events here, other racetracks, Flamborough, Merrittville around here, a bunch of tracks in the U.S. had different stages of events with different stages of fan base. But in Ontario, we were definitely restricted. The most we could ever have fan-wise is 100 people, and weren't limited on competitors or the people that could put the show on. But there wasn't enough money to pay, and so everybody took a haircut, whether it's the track owners or the operators and the fans, or well, I'll get to the fans, but the teams didn't race for as much money. There wasn't as much racing. But I think as a whole, the industry was able to do enough to keep the interest, to have people. The car counts were great. The racing was incredible, and that that's exciting. The worst part about the whole thing was that I said what makes this wheel turn is fans, and they got hit the worst. They were able to watch, whether it be streaming or on television, wherever possible. And that's awesome. But a real race fan wants to be here or be at any other racetrack in the province or the country or North America, and they couldn't. So the biggest kicker was definitely the most important piece of this whole puzzle. Together, it's all important. But whether you're a competitor, a track operator, ultimately the biggest thing is the fan, and they weren't able to come, which really sucked. And hopefully this year the vaccine's available now, becoming more and more available. And I think that as that becomes more and more available to the masses, that's going to start to ease restrictions. And at some point in 2021, let's hope that fans can come as they always wanted to, or as they always have, and we can get back on track here and get rocking.
One of the things you talk about fans, and for me, without really having much experience with the sport previously and coming to help you out at the end of 2017, one of the first things I did was help out in the campground. And right from the very beginning, my experience in the campground with the fans was something completely new to me. Having fans in the campground, having competitors in the campground, and seeing how everybody interacts together, how they're creating experiences, not just the race itself, but what happens before the race, what happens during the race. I mean, there's qualifying rounds, and, some fans are in the campground, some are in the stands, listening to the stories that they tell about different races at different racetracks and who was there and what happened. You really get a feeling how everybody's in this together. And that is so different than other sports. I know in football, you can go tailgate in front of a football stadium, and that's all the fans out there. But the players aren't there, especially during the Nationals when the campground is jammed, 800 campsites full, and everybody is having a great time. The fans, the competitors, and everybody. It made me realize, if this is part of what I am about to learn about this sport, I can't wait to learn more. And I have to say, I've made some really great personal relationships with the fans myself. But I'll tell you, the loyalty already with 2 full years under our belts, and seeing how they come race after race after, and they never miss. And not just at Jukasa, they travel all summer to all these racetracks, and this is part of their life. It's really a great thing to see.
And to hear, somebody like yourself that, like you say, hadn't been entrenched in the sport, to see that and recognize what you just said is probably the biggest reason why I've been in this sport or industry for so long. It's definitely all about the people. Race fans are the best. They're the most loyal. You can have, like you said, we could have 800 campers here, or whatever that number of people is, our average of, 5 people at campsite, and have some music out in the pavilion on the Saturday night after qualifying, however it works out. And it's like a little city out there. There's virtually no problems. Then you can have a concert setting with the same amount of people, depending on the concert. I'm not trying to run down concert people, but you're way more, we've had some different events here where the alertness of being ready for the unknown or what could happen or what probably is going to happen is way higher. When you have a race event, it doesn't matter how many people you have here. Of course, you have to, we all get a little stupid, have too many pops, whatever. And it's just a different group of people, even security that works for us, that work all kinds of different events, whether it's at concert bars, nightclubs, whatever. And they come here and work, and they see, there's way more people. And they tell me, I cannot believe these people, and how great they are. And they're here to have a good time. And it just speaks to the industry and the sport. And, probably one of our biggest problems, and we go through that now, trying to get some recognition through the government on trying to be relevant and make them understand our business, is that we're so proud about what we do in this sport, and we don't tell enough people about it. And that goes from fan to competitors to track operators. And going through this process with COVID, and that started this conversation, I can tell you that there was a time where we'd have never been listed, this industry, on anything any government documents. And with a group of us, or everybody in Ontario, that got together and started conversations and put proposals forward to the government in the first COVID stages, when they said what we could or couldn't do, motorsports facilities were listed. That was the first time ever. And that was because of a lot of work by a lot of people. And I think I told you about this, but back in December, just prior to Christmas, I got a Christmas card from Lisa MacLeod, who's the Minister of Sport and Tourism. That would have never happened. Every other
minister in Ontario.
Yes.
Yeah.
And every other industry, every other sport or tourism piece that they support yearly would get those cards because they support them, and then give them some different programs to get through the pandemic. And then for us, they never support us. We support tourism in our counties, cities, towns, just because we don't support it, but we drive it in most cases. And now, it gets back, it took a pandemic for us in this industry to teach our government about the impact we have in our counties, towns, cities, provinces.
And hopefully those cards keep coming.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of work to do, and we're not going to stop. And we're going to make sure we've done an economic impact study that's going to be, we should have it here early in the new year. And I think that the government's going to be shocked at the impact that we have in our areas. And so it's all worth it. One thing with the negatives of the pandemic, there's always, like any negative, there's a positive, and it's really up to us to make a positive out of something and move forward and try to be better at what we do.
And like you said before, if the fans win or the customer wins, you can't lose. And that,
100%.
Have you been able to keep in touch with the fans during the pandemic, and what are they saying? Yeah,
we have. We try to stay in touch. There's a lot of things on a lot of people's minds, for sure. A lot of things more important than racing. But it's still nice to touch base, whether it's via newsletter. I mean, every racetrack or people in this industry have different ways to stay in touch. Try to keep your socials and your website updated, send out blast emails. The only thing about the pandemic is that nobody is surprised by anything. If it wasn't a pandemic and you change a schedule or you cancel something or you do something else, everybody's like, what the heck's going on? And now everybody's been affected. So I would say there's a lot more important things to think about than us, but we do stay in touch. We have customers that stay in touch with us. We try to keep them informed on what's going on. That's the best thing you can do. And we'll have our new schedule for 2021 will be released here very shortly. And we'll just, we're moving ahead as normal, and we'll adjust if we have to.
So now that we've talked about the fans and how they've dealt with 2020, what about the competitors, Alex? How did the competitors deal with this, and how important was it for them to be able to have those races that you were able to get in towards the end of the season?
Like the fans, the competitors have been incredible. We had 3 races last year. They were kind of rental-based programs with some sanctioning bodies. And other racetracks had the same sort of thing. And, we had 2 NASCAR Pinty Series races that were shot for television, which is great. They had, some content for people to see on TSN. We had 2 ABC United Late Model Series races with Oscar, hot rods and modifieds and super stocks, and the car counts were incredible. So, I know there's pent up demand and people want to race, but at the same time, none of it's ideal. Everybody raced for less money. Promoters operated to try to break even. But I think as a group, we did it. I don't think as track owners, we did it to keep the program going, keep the industry stimulated. And wow, at first when we announced our first race, we talked about the possibility that if there's not going to be many people able to race for whatever reason, financial, afraid of the virus, whatever it may be, that we'll just bow out. If somebody phoned us and said they didn't feel comfortable, totally fine. And as it turned out, we got none of that. And the competitors were incredible. The only sad part, again, is the fans. We put on some great racing here and other racetracks, and people didn't get to see it live. Good thing is they got to see it, and that's great. But competitors, like the fans, being patient, and our partners, everybody understood, and there was no surprises during this pandemic. And at the just can't say enough about all those different groups.
All right, Alex. So, obviously 2020 was a tough year. We're almost past it now. We're on the verge of 2021. I know, like you just mentioned, the schedule is going to be coming out soon. So tell us, what's happening for Jukasa in 2021?
Can't announce specific things right now. There'll be a lot the same that we had scheduled for 2020. We're planning on having some new events that we were hoping to have in 2020, like the All-Star Monster Truck Tour, the Jukasa Festival of Bikes, which is going to be a huge motorcycle weekend.
I cannot wait for that one, honestly. I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah, and it may not be huge the first year, but it's going to be something that definitely is going to grow. I think we have a bunch of potential with that event. And just another form of motorsports. We'll have a Flat Track Canada race in conjunction with some OEM demo rides. And, as you know, you're instrumental in the planning for that and some different discussions we've had with vendors, et cetera. So it was really rolling well until, in February, early March, and then, of course, COVID, March of last year, and then COVID. And, it kind of set us back like everything else.
Live music, part of that as well?
Yeah, live music.
Live music. Do you think Three Fog might be part of that?
If you want to, just send an email about your interest, and we'll get back to you.
Okay, we'll do. Do you want to say anything else about that, or is that it for now? I thought I'd start it out because
yeah. So one of the a highlight for us this year at Jukasa was that because, you and Joni got married this summer, and because of COVID, you were going to have your wedding at our golf course and banquet facility, Mont Hill Golf and Country Club in Caledonia, and you weren't allowed to. So you approached me and said, what about having it in the pavilion out back? I said, absolutely. Let's see what we can do. So ended up being a cool wedding, small amount of people, outdoors, beautiful weather, live music. Did I say that? So it was all cool. Then we had live music. And for the people listening, the live music was your band called Three Fog. It was okay because after every set, we knew that the DJ was going to play real music. So,
wow,
we had something to look forward to.
Not even, hey, you guys came from nowhere. We practiced for months. Nothing, like no credit at all. How about the night before, like on the eve of the wedding? I appreciated your tutelage and your brother Jim. You're both right there trying to get us to be the best we could be that night.
It was rehearsal night, the Friday night before the wedding. You and your band, Three Fog. We'll get into later what 3FOG stands for.
Why don't we just say it right now?
Okay, it's three fucking old guys.
Yeah,
and
right.
Listen, that described you guys perfectly. Now, having said that, it wasn't my wedding, obviously, and there's no fans here, so I really didn't have anything to lose. But me and my brother Jimmy were here helping you guys get set up Friday night, and old Three Fogs up on stage doing a rehearsal. I think you got 3 chords into the first song, and Jimmy looked at me and went, oh my God, we're afraid for Joni and her family that they're going to have to listen to that, to be honest. So the least we could do, being friends and all, was to coach you guys up. And I think it was, bottle and a half later, we got going pretty good. You guys picked it up a ton. So I wasn't going to bring that part up, but definitely you guys were way better Saturday night based on the rehearsrsal.
You think so? You think it was your tutelage that helped us put it over the top?
Yeah. Jimmy's, mine.
Yeah.
You guys.
We did happen to break something very important to the wedding. I don't know if you remember that part.
God. Yeah. No, I remember for sure. Mark's wife Joni had 2 big, huge glass vases set up on either side of the stage with flowers in it, and her and Sandy and all the girls got all the stuff set up prior to the big rehearsal because they couldn't be there. Plus, I'm sure they didn't want to hear it. And then, like I say, we might have been a ball and a half in, and Jimmy might have had a fair share of that. And next thing you know, during our coaching, up and back and forth in front of the stage, one of those vases got the big steel toe put on it and got shattered. So, you know,
I never saw it happen. Did you see it happen? Do you know?
No. And I guess Jimmy cleaned it up best he could. You know, we get to Saturday and everybody's kind of filing in to help set up. And my wife, Sandy, looks, and right away she sees there's a vase
first thing
missing.
she noticed. And the second I walked out of the car.
Well, I shouldn't say it was missing. It was kind of pieced back together a little bit, and the flowers and stuff back in it.
Yeah, no, but
it was there. It's partially there.
Partially. That's the key word. Yeah.
And we thought it looked good. You know, being guys, we thought it looked good. But of course, you put a female eye on it, and it was stressful. Anyways, we got through it. You two got married. Three Fog was incredible.
Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
Not incredible enough to get a gig here, but incredible. And we'll just leave it at that.
Well, we did only play 2 songs.
Yeah. So why did you only play 2 songs? Because that's all you had.
Well, no, of course not. You should remember from the rehearsal, we went through our whole repertoire.
3.
What? No.
3.
No, there was way more than 3. Lucky Man, Simple Man. Of course, they sound the same, but they're very different songs. Feel like
sang for your new in-laws. Feel like making love.
Feel like making love. Yeah, I did apologize to them in advance for that.
It was nice when you sang to your new bride. Feel like making love in front of your new in-laws.
Yeah, well, I did. It wasn't the in-laws that were the problem, and I did apologize. It was Joni's son, Sasha. Yeah, he didn't see that. No, he didn't see that coming at all. And when he heard that, he was a little hurt by that.
Well, I thought he was. I figured he was, I should say, because I looked out in the parking lot and there he was laying under the back of the car in the grass with his ears covered.
Well, enough of that. Obviously, we're going to get a little personal in this podcast, and we hope you don't mind that. We're going to do the discussion of the day. This discussion of the day is going to be about whatever we want it to be. It doesn't have to be about racing. Today, mine is not going to be about racing, and I'm going to go first. And today I want to talk about Mad Elf Ale. Mad Elf Ale is a seasonal beer produced by Treg's Brewery. Believe they're in Pennsylvania. Every year I go across the border in Buffalo. I grab myself some Mad Elf Ale at Consumers Beverages. It's not able to be imported into Canada at this time, and with the border, we can't go across this year. Now, just to tell you a little bit about this Mad Elf Ale, this is one of the best beer experiences that I've had. And I shared it with you last year, and we'll get into that in a minute, but my next door neighbor, Darren, and I both really enjoy this beer. It happened by accident the first year, and then every year after we go and we grab a case of this Mad Elf Ale. It's not your typical beer. It's made with ripened cherries. There's not just one type of cherry in there, Alex. There's a Bing cherry, a Lambert cherry, a Van cherry, and last but not least, the Royal Anne cherry. And on top of that, you get raw honey, cocoa, and notes of cinnamon, clove, and allspice. This is a fantastic seasonal beer that represents the holidays. And if you go to their website at Treg's and look up Mad Elf, you will see what I mean. It's got a beautiful head on this beer. It's a little bit sweet, but it's 11% alcohol. It's not for the faint of heart. Last year I shared a Mad Elf beer with you, and at the time you told me that it's not too bad. But I think you might have a different opinion now. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you thought of it?
Not really. The opinion's the same, but everybody just heard you describe it. So I'm glad we don't have video, because as you're describing it, it could have got a little bit triple X rated. That's how excited you are about this beer. You're so excited about it. I didn't have the heart to tell you what it seemed like to me. So I'd like to say I drank it, but it was more, I might have mentioned to you, it was kind of like drinking Heinz ketchup. You had to smack the neck to get it to kind of clump out so you could drink or eat. You almost had to eat it. It reminded me of, talked about my father racing. And I can remember he raced in his engines, Kendall GT1 motor oil. And back then he raced straight SAE 50. And he used to always get me, he'd drain the oil and he'd get me to pour in the fresh oil for the oil change. And it took me a few years to understand why, is because it took about 10 minutes a can to pour this shit in. It was so thick. So immediately, as I'm trying to pour this or jam this stuff down my throat that you call beer, it made me think about my childhood and Kendall GT1 oil.
Wow, Mad Elf made you think of your childhood. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are we saying here?
I'm glad you liked it. And I'm glad you still like it. If you want to split on a case again next year in, late 2021, late this year, if we're allowed to cross the border again, and you want to go over and get a case, I'll take you. But I'll get something else if you don't mind.
Well, I did, because, it wasn't just Mad Elf that we brought back across the border, although I did ask you, because we were only allowed one case of beer each and you didn't have any, you brought, the case of Mad Elf for me. And
yeah, it was easy.
It was easy?
At the border it was easy.
Well, they didn't question it?
Well, they asked me if I had anything to declare and said no. We had said we bought a couple of small gifts. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, they said head over there for inspection. And of course, anytime that happens, you're a bit nervous. But, right away, Sandy's, what are you going to do about the beer? I said, relax. We're good. We're good. So beer's in the trunk sitting there, 6 all together. The border security asks to open up the trunk. We do it. He looks inside. Case of oil. Yeah. How come we didn't declare it? I said, hey, listen, we bought, we've had that. I bought it to change the oil in the car and prior to coming over and we didn't get it done. He said, fair enough. You're good to go. So even the border security knew it was oil.
Obviously, many people don't share your opinion. I'm just looking here on beeradvocate.com and I'm just going to read a couple of quick reviews here. This one is from Harry Powers in Massachusetts. Pours a clear reddish brown with a small short-lived head. Another one from JBird63. Beautiful ruby red. The smell of cherries is wonderful. Not too sweet with a bit of fairness. Smooth going down. Masks the high ABV, which by the way is 11% alcohol by volume. A slight overtone of chocolate. This is a delicious and deceiving ale. You certainly don't want to drink more than a couple of them and drive. No question about it. But your opinion obviously is not shared by the hundreds of reviews here of Mad Elf Ale on Beer Advocate. And I'm just going to finish off with one more here from KJ35 from New York. Easily the strongest beer I've ever tried. That's not a bad thing. In fact, I found it to be flavorful. Very glad I was able to find this. Unfortunately, not in my area. Well, and one more. Sorry, I did say that was the last, but Andy Peters, 1971 from Georgia, just said on November 18th, finally was able to try this after years of wanting it, as I want to be a part of the country where it's available. Almost no head and very little visible carbonation. I didn't know this had hops, but they sprinkled it only on a very tiny amount of hops in it, giving it an extremely slight hoppy taste. What the hell does that mean? Anyway,
listen, send a copy of this podcast to the beer company, to Tregs, because we're looking for sponsors for this deal, and I'll like it. I'll love it. I mean, what you've said about it, anybody that's listening is going to have to try it just based on your little ad there you just did.
and one last thing here that he says is that you can really taste the honey coming through this. The cherries are notable, but not overpowering. Really a great beer, and it's exceeding my expectations. Thank you, Andy Peters, 1971 from Georgia.
Yeah, key there is the honey. So if anybody's tried to drink or pour or squirt out cold honey, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, move on. Let's go.
All right. Alex, you're DOTD.
Well, maybe not as fun of a topic, but just one I just wanted to touch on because, of course, it's 2021 and vaccines starting to roll out across North America and the world for that matter. And in the new year, of course, it's an opportunity. People look for a fresh start. And I think probably more so this year than previous years. Everybody was so happy to get rid of 2020 and move into 2021 for obvious reasons. And I think just with the hope of things being better. And, it just makes you think, is it actually any different? I mean, COVID still exists. It hasn't gone away. We haven't killed it yet. We haven't got to 0 cases anywhere in North America. Really, at the end of the day, is any different? I probably not, but I think it just gives us all a small amount of hope and reason to look ahead. And I think that's a good thing. Look, we talked positively about 2021 in the race business and being able to go back across the border and get a case of Kendall GT1. I'm sorry, Tregs.
Tregs, Mad Elf.
Yeah. Keep plugging. Maybe we'll get a deal. So, I mean, my topic, I'm not going to drag it out and try to get, some marketing dollars from this like you did with the Tregs Mad Elf Ale. There's not a lot of things different as the calendar turned, but I think that as we move along here, I think we all have a lot of good stuff to look forward to. And I think the coolest part is just getting back to normal. And I don't want to say the new normal because I think what that does is you're buying into the fact that things are going to be different. And I don't think we want things to be different. We want things to be as they were. And if it's different, it's on the other side of the meter in a positive way, right, and not changing the way we operate in our life.
And on this topic, I agree with you 100%. We're ready to move forward. The vaccines are coming out. Let's hope that everybody stays safe, that they're able to, that we're able to get past this, and that we have a great season ahead. How can our listeners interact with us online?
Lots of different ways, for sure. We're both on Twitter ourselves, Mark_McSporran, Nags_Alex, and our Wingnut Sports Twitter account is just simply Wingnut Sports. Our Facebook group, where we'll have a good discussion group there, is at facebook.com/groups/Wingnut Sports.
Yeah, and also where Facebook's concerned, just go to Facebook, do a search for Wingnut Sports.
Wingnut Sports.
Yeah, and you'll find our discussion group, which is where we're going to spend the majority of our time and hopefully be able to talk to you.
Yeah, we'll get into some Instagram stuff. Same thing at Wingnut Sports. Our email, if you want to send us a note, some ideas. Maybe Tregs wants to send us a note to sponsor the program. It's simply wingnutsports@gmail.com. And our website, wingnutsports.com. Everything Wingnut Sports, that'll get you. And, of course, that'll get you to the Driver in Deep podcast information as well. So a bunch of different ways. We'll try to be in the forefront in all those different handles and different social media platforms.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna stay on top of that. I mean, for being able to connect is really important to us. We want to be able to talk to you online, so we hope that you take the time to join us there. For Alex, my name's Mark, and this has been the Driver in Deep podcast. And we certainly hope to see you next time.
Absolutely, Mark. It's our first kick at the can here, but we've got a lot of great content coming up. We think that everybody's going to love it. We know everybody's going to love it. We look forward to being in touch and trying to show you the backside of the industry.
Until next time.